Time now for Stanley's Stinkers, the only show that uses reverse prognostication to predict the losers in college football's biggest games. With this week's losers, here he is, Stanley Reese.
Hello again, and thanks for joining us. With just a few games left in the 2013 college football season, it's a last chance time for some teams and a big chance time for others. Last week, Stanley Stinkers finished 16-4, holding our overall success rate steady at 78%. But that's not really bad considering the fact that we never back down from the big games. We use reverse prognostication to predict the losers in college football. With that said, here are the teams we'll be watching this week. The Florida State Seminoles at the Florida Gators. The Swamp Lizards are suffering through one of their worst seasons in ages, and the going just gets tougher this week. Needless to say, these two great rivals are headed in opposite directions. Florida is riding a 6-game losing streak, while the River Chiefs are trying to extend a 13-game winning streak that runs back into last season. There's not much of a chance for an upset here, but then again, that is why they play the games. Stanley Stinker in a blowout. Florida. The Georgia Bulldogs and the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. This game has often been referred to as clean old-fashioned hate, but this year the Dog fans might just be saying, ouch. Georgia hasn't had the kind of season they expected, but that might be blamed on the fact that the team has been hit with record numbers of injuries. To complicate matters, the Bulldogs starting quarterback Aaron Murray is out with a season-ending knee injury. That might be enough to give the Hive a much-needed edge. Offensively, Tech can wreck any team in America, especially those who have already been injured. Stanley Stinker, Georgia. The Arizona Wildcats and the Arizona State Sun Devils. This game is for the Territorial Cup, and it's also been called the Duel in the Desert. This year, it could be called Payback. Last year, Arizona was the higher ranked of the two teams, and it was the Devils who dished out the upset. This year, the Cats come in fresh off a somewhat shocking blowout of Oregon. If ASU can shut down Kadeem Carey, the upset will be averted. If not, it could come down to the final minutes. In a classic Pac-12 finish, Stanley Stinker, Arizona. Well, stay with us. We have much more coming up, including a special episode of the Miles Jack Show, the battle for the Palmetto Trophy, and, of course, the mother of all Iron Bowls. That and more coming up.
I'd like to teach the world to sing in perfect harmony. I'd like to buy the world a Coke and keep it company. That's the song I'd like to teach the world to sing in perfect harmony. I'd like to buy the world a Coke.
How to be a great dad in 15 seconds. Bike ride, go fish, walk in the park, phone call, milkshake, play catch, picnic, fly a kite, tell jokes, laugh, talk, read a story, tell a story, bumper car, swing set, bowling, pillow fight, cut loose, stay tight. Whew. Because the smallest moments can have the biggest impact on a child's life. Take time to be a dad today. Call 877-4DAD-411 or visit fatherhood.gov. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
The Penn State Nittany Lions and the Wisconsin Badgers. After being denied a chance to chop down the opponent's goalpost last week in Minnesota with their well-earned trophy, the Badgers might need something to gnaw on instead. And as if on cue, in walk the Nittany Mountain Cats. Penn State has been doing an admirable job recovering from an NCAA spanking, but their efforts might not be good enough to stop the 1-2 dance from the Wisconsin running back tandem. Call it the Penn State polka if you want, but Stanley Stinker nonetheless, Penn State. The Baylor Bears at the TCU Horned Frogs. Hopes for a possible national title all but ended last week for the Bears as their high-octane offense sputtered against OK State. The spark should be ignited again this week against the Toads in Fort Worth. TCU is having a disappointing season with just 4 wins, but if there is a bright spot, it's their defense, which is third in the country with 18 interceptions. It's the last game of the year for the Toads, so look for anything to happen, especially a fairy tale ending. Stanley Stinker, TCU. The UCLA Bruins and the USC Trojans. The Miles Jack Show was preempted last week by Arizona State, but it returns this week at its normal time. This week's show features a special guest appearance by Ed Orgeron and his resurgent USC soldiers, who as of late have been unstoppable. This is also an extended job interview for Orgeron, whose title still says interim coach. After an embarrassment last week, the Bruin Bears will be ready to take Tinseltown's title and win the ratings war outright. Stanley Stinker in a drama-filled episode, USC. The Texas A&M Aggies at the Missouri Tigers. Johnny Football proved last week that he is human after all when he suffered his worst game as an Aggie. Now, we get to see with that flamboyant signal caller and what he'll do to answer the loss. Meanwhile, Truman the Tiger has the SEC Division title in sight, and if he can win this one, a trip to the Atlanta Zoo could be in his future. With senior signal caller James Franklin back at the helm, it's hard to count against Mizzou at home. Pack your bags, Truman. Stanley Stinker, Texas A&M. One more break, and on the other side, we've got the Mercenaries against the Gleaming Gophers, the Who's versus the Hokies, and, of course, our game of the week on the Plains, the Crimson Tide and the Tigers. Stay with us.
Take a look under your bed. Find stuff under there? What about jobs? No? Now try your basement. There's a pair of overalls that overall you're not so into anymore. A perfectly good laptop that hasn't seen your lap in months. And even more stuff, but still no jobs? Well, you really have both. See, stuff is defined as household articles considered as a group. Sometimes this stuff is no longer needed. Wait, no longer needed? That can't be right. Because remember those jobs you were looking for? Those are really needed. And they're the stuff inside your stuff. Even inside that winter coat that moved with you to Phoenix. Our job is to unlock those jobs. And it starts when you donate your stuff to your local Goodwill. Here's how we do it. When you donate to Goodwill, we sell your stuff to provide job training for people right here in your community. So just by teaming up with Goodwill, you help create jobs. And isn't that worth parting with the leftover keytar from your 80s cover band? Goodwill. Donate stuff, create jobs. Find your nearest donation center at goodwill.org. A message from Goodwill and the Ad Council.
The Clemson Tigers and the South Carolina Gamecocks. The Purple Tigers take a short drive southeast for their annual rivalry game against the Fearsome Fowl. For Dabo Swinney and his Clemson Tigers, this will be their chance to show their Carolina cousins the 2013 season was no fluke. Coming off of 3 games in which the Tigers scored 50 or more points, it'll be up to the old ball coach and his defense to woe up that Clemson offense. This is for the Palmetto Bowl trophy, and South Carolina has won it 4 straight times. Make that 5. Stanley Stinker, Clemson. The Minnesota Golden Gophers at the Michigan State Spartans. After being snubbed in most preseason polls, the Mercenaries from Michigan State have been proving their pundits wrong. With just a single loss on their slate, the Spartans' hope of landing in the Big Ten championship game will come true next week. But first, they need to sharpen their sabers with a game against the Gleaming Gophers. And this is a Minnesota team that has held their own against some tough defenses. Junior David Cobb has 4 100-yard games in his last 5 outings, and he'll put the home team through a tough test. But in the end, Stanley Stinker, Minnesota. The Alabama Crimson Tide at the Auburn Tigers. This game has already been big enough, with enough weight on it just being the Iron Bowl. Now, with the 2 teams both ranked in the top 4, the label has changed to the mother of all Iron Bowls. Coming off the stressful 3-8 season, the Striped Cats restocked their bus and hit the road with a new quarterback and a new head coach. Since then, the trip has been remarkable. Not to say the same trip hasn't been enjoyable for the Crimson Pachyderms. Their undefeated season is on the line against what some fans call their kid brother. But this year, that sibling rivalry has much more meaning, and Mama is certainly calling one of their names, Stanley Stinker, in a classic, Alabama. While we're at it, here are a few more games we're watching. Michigan will lose to Ohio State. Kansas will be shut down by Kansas State. Wake Forest will be sunk by Vanderbilt. Air Force will be grounded by Colorado State. Purdue will be boiled by Indiana. Virginia will be carved by Virginia Tech. Notre Dame will fall to Stanford. Kentucky will be shot by Tennessee. North Carolina will be spooked by Duke. And in a game that features my Heisman frontrunner, Syracuse will be run over by Andre Williams and the Boston College Eagles. Stanley Stinkers is a production of GMD Sports. It is intended for entertainment only. A free podcast and blog is always available online at StanleyStinkers.com. We are the most entertaining college football show in America because we use reverse prognostication to predict the losers in college football's biggest game.